hopefully. Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Daily Rambam, the Daily Rambam community. It's a pleasure to have you with us. So we continue today Hilchot Yesodei Torah, the laws of the fundamentals of Torah, in chapter 5. After we explain the mitzvah of knowing that there is one God, that there's no other God, that there's the unity of Hashem, there's the mitzvah to love God, the mitzvah to fear God, and the mitzvah now to sanctify God's name. That's what we're going to be speaking about, and not to desecrate God's name. And that's going to be right here in chapter 5. So you can follow in your book or in the text, which is online. Bezrat Hashem. So let's start with this. Chapter 5. Kol ish Israel. Kol Bet Israel, all of the Jewish people, the entire house of Israel is commanded, al Kiddush Hashem, mitzuvim al Kiddush Hashem, Hagadol. You are all commanded, we are all commanded to sanctify God's name, the great name of God. Shenemar, as it says in the verse, V'nigdashti betor bnei Israel, I shall be sanctified amongst the children of Israel. And not only should we sanctify God's name, but certainly we should not desecrate God's name. As it says, and you shall not desecrate my holy name. It's very, very interesting. The word Hilul Hashem. Oh, it's a Hilul Hashem. What does a Hilul Hashem come from? So one of the commentaries explains, I think it's the Maharal, that when you have many words that have the same root, there's something in common. Once you understand the root of a word, you're going to understand the depth of each word. So you have the word Hilul Hashem, that's the creation of God's name. The word Halal, somebody that was been killed. The word Halil, which is a flute. The word Halal, space. What does that mean? What's the connection? A flute is something that has an empty space inside of it. Halal, a dead person, is somebody that is void of life. What's Hilul Hashem? Somebody, an action, an act that is void of godliness. That's what Hilul Hashem is. Kiddush Hashem, on the other hand, the concept of Kadosh, holy. Kadosh means, in the Zohar, Tzadik Gimel, Perek Gimel, book Gimel, over there it explains Kadosh is Chokhmah. Kadosh is the level of wisdom, that's the supernal wisdom of man when he surrenders to God. That is called Kadosh, which means it's the super consciousness of man. So Kiddush Hashem is a super consciousness, while Chilul Hashem is a void of consciousness. So let's, void of godliness. L'chaim. It's water. So we continue. Kitzad. What does that mean? Let's talk about this Kiddush Hashem. Well, what does that mean practically? If a Gentile is going to come and he should arise and force a Jew to transgress any of the commandments stated in the Torah on the pain of death, right? So she'amod goy ve'inos et Yisrael avor al achad mikol mizot amurot b'Torah o yahargenu. He says either I'm going to kill you or you're going to do that, or you're going to do this sin. What should you do? The Torah, the Chachamim explain, Ya'avor ve'al ya'areg. It is better that he must transgress, not better, he must transgress the sin and not be killed. Shene'emar, b'mitzvot. What does it say about the mitzvot? It says, Asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai b'hem. Man has to live in the Torah. A person doesn't die in the Torah, he lives in the Torah. The Torah is there to bring you life. A person shouldn't die because of mitzvot. So what happens in this situation? He says, no, I'm ready, kill me, I will not eat non-kosher. He says, I have a gun, and be careful, if you don't eat this cheeseburger, that's it, I'm going to kill you. And the person says, yeah, kill me. No cheeseburger for me. In that situation, he made a sin. A person is liable for the loss of his soul. which means that there's sins that you're not allowed to give your life for. What are we talking about? Which commandments are we explaining? Any commandment. Bishar mitzvot, any of the commandments. But if it's going to be the commandment of chutz me'avodah zarah ve'gilui haraot u'shfichut damim, if it's going to apply, it will not apply to idol worship, to forbidden relations, and bloodshed. In these three cases, if a person is going to be asked, if he's going to be under duress, he is going to be told either you sin or you're going to get killed, then in that situation, you are supposed to get killed. You rather die, it's better to die than to transgress. It's not only better to die than to transgress, he has to die and not transgress in this situation. Wow. However, if he tells him, אבל שלוש עבירות אלו, אם יאמר לו עבור ועל אחד מהם, או ייהרג ואל יעבור. בא בדברים אמורים, when are we speaking about? בזמן שהגוי מתכוון להנאת עצמו, כגון שאנסו לבנות לו ביתו בשבת, או לבשל לו תבשילו, או אנס אישה לבעלה וכיוצא בזה. When does this apply? The above apply. When a Gentile's intent is for his own benefit. For example, if he forces him to build a home or to cook his food on Shabbat, and he says, I'm going to kill you, then you have to transgress. Or forces a woman to cohabit with him and the like. But if he intends simply to force him to transgress the commandments, if it was only him present and there are no 10 Jews present, he should transgress and not be killed. So one second. How do we divide these categories? How do we divide these categories? So let's look at our chart here. Hope you all see the chart that I put for you. Right? We're going to read it together like this. It's going to be clear to all. I hope you see it well. So you have a situation that, I'm sorry, 1 second. You have a situation, as you see on the chart. I'm pulling it up for myself as well. So, according to Torah, we see that if a person is under duress, they tell him to transgress, it's better to transgress and live. There are 3 situations in which you must transgress and you must die and not transgress. You must die and not transgress. And what is that? That is in a situation where one forces you to have either committing adultery, forbidden sexual relations, or murder. Then you accept death. Now, what happens in a situation where it's private persecution, right? Except for these 3 things, you should transgress. But if it's going to be in public, then you don't transgress. And that's what he says. If he forces you to transgress the commandments, if it was only him present and there are not 10 Jews present, he should transgress and not be killed. But if he is forced to transgress in the presence of 10 Jews, he should allow himself to be killed and not transgress, even if he only intends to force him to transgress one of the other commandments. So we have different categories of commandments. I'm going to read the halakha in Hebrew. Aval. אם נתכוון להעבירו על המצוות בלבד. Right? Which means that he says, really, I want you to go against the mitzvot. I'm going to kill you. If it's in private, there's no 10 Jews, it's okay. Then he has to he has to transgress. But if he does it in front of 10 Jews, he says, eat the cheeseburger, cook for me on Shabbat. But it's not one of the 3 sins. Because it's in public, then even for that, he has to be ready to give his life. Which means a Jew should not transgress and should not desecrate God's name in public. That's called the desecration of God's name in public. He should be killed. Even if there's other types of commandments, as you see on the chart on my side. This is all it applies at a if it's not a time of a period of forced apostasy, which means that they're not forcing you to convert. אבל בשעת השמד וכשיעמוד מלך רשע כנבוכדנצר וחבריו יגזור שמד על ישראל לבטל דתם ומצווה מן המצוות. But if it's like at the time of Nebuchadnezzar and his buddies, that they decreed that apostasy upon the Jews to nullify their religion or even one of the commandments, what happens in this situation? We're not talking about one of the three sins. Or mitzvah min mitzvot, ya'areg ve'al ya'avor. In this case, you have to die. You can't let even something, or sages mention even if they're going to ask you to change your shoelace from one color to the other. But they want you to do it because they want you to be under their authority. In that situation, you don't let that happen. אפילו על אחת משאר מצוות בן נאנס, בתוך 10 בן נאנס בינו לבין הגויים, which means that whether he's by himself or whether he is in the presence of 10, he has to give his life. Why? Because there's a movement now to take away religion from the Jews. It's funny, as I'm speaking to you guys, I'm thinking it's interesting that if one letter in the Torah has a crack, the whole Torah becomes pasul. When the essence of the Jewish people is attacked, then every letter counts. Every crack counts. And we cannot give up anything. Even though in normal circumstances we are allowed to. כל מי שנאמר, יהרוג ואל יעבור ואל ייהרג ונהרג ולא עבר, הרי זה מתחייב בנפשו. So, anybody that the Torah says you should transgress and not be killed, and he decided to be a big tzaddik and be killed even for not eating a cheeseburger under duress, then he is liable of spiritual death of his soul. וכל מי שנאמר בו יהרג ואל יעבור, and any of the cases that we've mentioned before that says you should die and not transgress, like we said before, the 3 exceptions of murder, forbidden relations, and idolatry, and he got killed. He gave his life for this. Then he sanctified God's name. And if this was in front of 10 Jews present, then he did a public sanctification of God's name. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Just like Daniel, Mishael, and Azariah, when everybody was supposed to bow at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, and he wanted, and they were good friends of Nebuchadnezzar, they were close to the government, right? And they didn't bow, and at that moment they got thrown in the lion's den. They sanctified God's name. Of course, they had a miracle that happened to them, but they didn't know that. So they were ready to get killed and not accept Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Akiva v'chaverav, or any of the people, just like Rabbi Akiva and the 10 martyrs that we read about on Yom Kippur, on Tisha B'Av, or whatever your custom is when you read it, right? In all of these cases, once a person sanctified, right? He sanctified God's name. Well, at this moment, he sanctify God's name by being killed. And here the Rambam is going to say, you have to know that these people that were killed and martyred by the government, it says concerning them that there's no level above theirs. A person that dies at Kiddush Hashem because he is Jewish or for the sake of Hashem, there's no higher level than Kiddush Hashem. You have to know that even Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch, he writes that he wanted to get to the level of Kiddush Hashem and wanted to die for God, to die at Kiddush Hashem, and because he did a certain thing, that wasn't permitted from him. Imagine, he wrote the whole code of Jewish law that everybody respects. Everything we learn from him. But because he didn't do a certain thing, he didn't merit. So it's something even higher than the whole code of Jewish law, and that's dying for the Kiddush Hashem. But it's better to live in a way of sanctifying God's name. ועליהם נאמר, כי עליך הורגנו כל היום, נחשב לקצום תבחר, ועליהם נאמר, אספו לי חסידי קוראתי ביתי על הזבח. On there, the Rambam says, it says in the Pasuk, for your sake we have been martyred all day, we have been considered as sheep to slaughter, and regarding them it says, gather unto me, my pious ones, those who enter my covenant by slaughter. What happens if a person that is supposed to be killed in these three sins, and he still did it? He did the sin. Told him, either I kill you, or you're going to kill somebody. You're going to have to kill somebody, or I kill you. And then he desecrated God's name. And if it was in front of 10 Jews, then he desecrated God's name in public. And not only did he do the transgression, he did not do the positive commandment of sanctifying God's name. So he desecrated, transgressed, and did not sanctify. You might say, oh, this man was killed, and he knew he was killing, It wasn't willingly, it was under duress, but nevertheless, he still killed. So what happens in such a situation? You have to know, since he did it under duress, not willingly, and malkinoto, he does not get lashes, and he does not get punished by capital punishment. Even if he killed because of he was under duress. Malkinoto, שאין מלכינותו וממיתין, אלא לעובר ברצונו בעדים והתראה. When is a person flogged? And when is he put to death by court? Only if there were witnesses and there was a warning. And he still did it. Otherwise, you can't do it. שנאמר בנוטל מזר עולמו ושמתי אני את פני באיש ההוא מפני השמואל עמדו ההוא לא אנוז ולא שוגה ולא מוטה. As it says concerning the Molech, there was a avodah zarah, idol worship, there's a Molech, terrible avodah zarah. They would put like a fire, and between the two lines of fire, a person would take his child and give one of his children to this god, the Molech, and basically he would be cooked, not completely, not burnt, but cooked, medium rare. In such situations, imagine what they used to do, terrible. It says, this man, I shall turn my face against this man, God says, he's going to get punishment. That man, our sages learn in the Talmud, that man means, why do we have to say this man? We know who did it. This man, it says, this man, in a case that he wasn't forced, and it wasn't inadvertent, inadvertently, and he wasn't misled. And therefore, in this situation, we can't punish this person that killed. If a person transgressed idol worship under duress, and he is not going to be punished by karet, which is his soul will be not cut away from Hashem, and for sure he will not get capital punishment. How much more so all the other mitzvot of the Torah, that if a person is doing it under duress, right? We don't. He's not going to get punished. And concerning a woman that's being raped, right, and she eventually participates in this sin, we say we don't do anything to her, right? She was under duress. Halacha hey. נשים שאמרו להם גויים תנו לנו אחת מכן וטימא ונטמא אותה ואם לאו נטמא את כולכן. So this is a very interesting halacha. What happens if women are told by Gentiles, give us one of you to violate, or if not, we will violate all of you? Itamu kulam. They should allow themselves to all be violated rather than to hand over even a single Jewish soul, as we said. V'chen im amru lahem goyim, if Gentiles say to them, תנו לנו אחד מכם ונהרגנו, ואם לאו נהרוג כולכם. Give us one person that we should kill. If not, we'll kill all of you. Then they should all be killed. ואל ימסרו להם נפש אחת מישראל, and not a soul of the Jewish people should not be given to them. והם ייחדו להם ואמרו תנו לנו פלוני ונהרוג כולכם. אם היה מחויב מיתה כשבע בן בכרי ייתנו אותו להן. ואין מוריד להן כן לכתחילה, ואם אינו חייב יהרגו כולם ואל ימסרו להם נפש אחת מישראל. So what happens if they say, we want this one? We want, like the story of Sheva ben Bichri, that you're going to take him, he rebelled against the king. We want him, if not, we're going to kill everybody. In this case, that he was punishable by death by the king, you're allowed to give that Jew because he's been punished. He rebelled against the king, but if he's not liable of death penalty, then in that situation, you all get killed, and you don't give a soul of the Jewish people. The same way it said concerning forced transgression, so it says concerning sickness. If a person falls ill and is in imminent danger of death, and the doctors say the only way he can be healed is through a specific method which involves transgressing a Torah prohibition. So what do we do? Osinlo, of course. You need to heal him. What's the question? In a time of danger for that person's life, we're going to do everything to save him. And mitrapin right. Chutz are the exception of avodah zarah, idol worship, gilui arayot, forbidden relations, and shfichut damin, and bloodshed. Shafiru b'makom sakana, even in a state of danger, and mitrapin bahen. Right? You don't heal yourself with these things, and it's rather that you die. And if he did use this to be healed, then he's going to have the appropriate punishment. So this is interesting, because there was a story in the Talmud of a man that he said, the only way I can be healed, I'm lovesick, and I need this woman to be with me. I just need to hear her voice. Our sages said, absolutely not. This situation, you're not allowed to at all. Where do we learn this law that for these three sins specifically, you have to get killed? So it says, Shenemar, it says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your possessions. Even if he takes your life, our sages say. And to kill a Jewish soul in order to save another soul or to save another person from a coercer, logic implies that one life not be destroyed to save another. It's logical. שאין מאבדים נפש מפני נפש, והראיות הוקשו נפשות. And here it's something very, very interesting. He says, when we talk about forbidden relations, says the Torah, that it's equal to murder. שנאמר, כי כאשר יקום איש על רוח וצחו נפש, כן הדבר הזה. There's a pasuk. For if a man, as a man rises against his fellow to murder him, so too this, where a woman is being raped. Which means, guys, from this halakha I learned about sexual abuse. It's like murder, killing a person, but literally speaking. במה דברים אמורים, שאין מתרפים משאר איסורים במקום סכנה? When does it apply that one may not violate other prohibitions for the sake of healing, except in a life-threatening circumstance? Because you could say, you know what, if that's who says only in a situation where I'm going to die, I should eat non-kosher or transgress Shabbat or whatever it is. Maybe in other situations too. Says, בזמן שהן דרך הנאתן כמו שמאכילין את החולה שקצים ורמסים וחמץ בפסח ושמאכילין אותו ביום הכיפורים. אבל שלא דרך הנאתן כמו שעושים לו רצייה או מלוגמה מחמץ ומעולה, או שמשכין אותו דברים שיש בהם מר מעורב עם איסור מאכל, שהרי אין בהם הנאה לאחריך, אך זה מותר ואפילו שלא במקום סכנה. So he says, when these things of healing, right, are used in a manner that brings pleasure, right, such as feeding the healed person insects or crawling creatures or chametz on Pesach or feeding him on Yom Kippur. However, which means in a situation where even it brings him pleasure, but it's going to heal him, you're allowed to heal him in every possible way. Is it possible that you're going to transgress to heal? So he says, however, if it is not in a matter which affords pleasure, such as preparing for him a compress or a bandage of chametz on Pesach, or of orla, which is the fruit which is prohibited in the first 3 years, or to have him drink a bitter portion mixed with a prohibited foods, which provides no pleasure to the palate, this is permitted even when there is no life-threatening danger. I'm going to read the halakha in Hebrew, and then read it in English, and then we're going to re-explain it. He says, אבל שלא דרך הנאתן, כגון שעושים לו רצייה ומלוגמה מחמץ ומעורלה, ושמשכין אותו דברים שיש בהם ממר מעורב עם איסור מאכל, שהרי אין בהם הנאה לאחריך, הרי זה מותר, ואפילו שלא בכל סכנה. חוץ, at the exception of כלאי הכרם. כלאי הכרם, what's it כלאי הכרם? Right. Mixtures of vineyards. You're not allowed to mix different types of fruits together when you sow, which especially we're talking about grapes. Ubasar bechalav, or basar and chalav, where it says you're not allowed to have you're not allowed to have pleasure of these. Shem asurim, which are prohibited, afilu shelo derech hanaatan, which means they're prohibited even when it's not for your pleasure. לפיכך אין מתרפים בהם אפילו שלא דרך הנתן במקום סכנה. You only can heal yourself with basar bechalav, with meat and milk that's mixed together, or a mixture of vineyard, only if it's in a state of sakana. So what did we learn in this halakha? We learned in this halakha that what we said originally, you have to live. If you have to live, you have to be healed. If you have to be healed, can you be healed by one of the three sins of bloodshed, avodah zarah, and forbidden relations? Absolutely not. In no circumstance. If you did use one of these three to be healed, you will be punished appropriately. But what happens now concerning all the other prohibitions? Am I allowed to do a prohibition in order to save my life? Yes. If it's in order to save your life, you're allowed to. What about prohibitions of eating non-kosher for something which is not going to save my life, but it's going to bring me relief? For example, a person has a sickness, but it's not life-threatening. If it is not in its original state if it's going to be something which is mixed with bitter and you're not going to have pleasure, the whole problem is to have pleasure of the food when it goes through your throat. So some people, for example, there are capsules of medicine which are made of swine, right? And you're not allowed the gelatin which comes from swine. Yeah, so some people take the content and they don't swallow it, or they put it in a way. Sometimes you have to take certain medicines for infections or whatever it is. In that case, you cannot benefit in your throat of the pleasure. So you have to mix it with something bitter. And in that case, you're allowed to have it. When I said the halacha before, I said it too early. A person which saw a woman that he is interested in and he was about to die. The only way he can be healed if he has a relation with her. Even if she's single. And even to speak with this unmarried woman on with a separation that you shouldn't see her. Right? So in this case, we do not permit him to do that. And he'd rather die than speak with her on the other side of the mechitza, the separation, behind the fence. Because the daughters of Israel should not be wanted. They shouldn't be given it's okay, we can use you for whatever you want. What is this? Respect. And this will bring to immoral promiscuity. And this is incredible. This halakha particularly touches me very much. Anyone who willingly transgresses, uncoerced, one of the Torah's commandment, bishat nef befesh lachis, with intended anger intended intention, the intention of angering Hashem, God forbid, he desecrates God's name. And therefore, a person takes an oath, which means he uses Hashem in order to take an oath, which is a lie, to use God for his lie. People have expressions sometimes. I swear on the Torah, and I swear on. What are you doing? What are you saying? And you're lying to me, and you're using this. You're using God for this. There's nothing more despicable. He is desecrating God's name. As it says, you will desecrate God's name. Ani Hashem, I'm the Lord your God. And if he does this in public, then he is desecrating God's name in a public. And this is the part I like. Conversely, if one avoids transgressing or performs a positive commandment, lo mipnei davar ba'olam, for no other motive, lo pachad velo yira, not because of awe, not because of fear, velo levakesh kavod, not because of honor, ela mipnei haborei yitbarach, just for the sake of God. Keveniat Yosef HaTzadik atzmo me'eshet rabo, just like Yosef did. Yosef HaTzadik did when he was standing in front of Potiphera. He sanctified God's name. You understand? The fact that you're doing something right, but you're doing for the sake of Hashem, that's a Kiddush Hashem, which means you could live your whole life al Kiddush Hashem in everything that you do. Yud Aleph 11. ויש דברים אחרים שהם בכלל חילול השם, and the other things which are a desecration of God's name. והוא שיעשה אדם גדול בתורה ומפורסם בחסידות, and this is if a person great in Torah and in Chassidut, right, he is going to do it. He's great in his piety. דברים שהבריות מרננים אחריו בשבילם. Things that people will start talking about him. ואף על פי שאינן עבירות, they're not sins, he still desecrated God's name, which means according to your level of person, that's how you have to behave. כגון, שלוקח ואינו נותן דמי מקח לאלתר, a person says, I'll pay you later. והוא שיש לו, and he has the possibility to pay him. ונמצאו המוכרים תובעים אותו והוא מקיפן. And what happens is the sellers demand a payment and he pushes them off and pushes them off. או שירבה בצחוק, or they jokes around excessively. או באכילה ושתייה אצל עמי הארץ וביניהם, or he eats with a simple folk all the time and he's always joking around not to bring them back to Torah. That's another thing. Or שאין דיבורו מנחת עם הבריות, or he's an angry person. He doesn't speak nicely with people. He's very abrupt in the way he speaks. ואינו מקבלם בספר פנים יפות, and he does not receive them pleasantly. אלא בעל קטטה וכעס. He's always angry, right? וכיוצא בדברים האלו, and such things, הכל לפי גודלו של חכם, everything according to the level of this chacham, this sage of Torah, which is supposed to be acting like a sage of Torah, right? Everything in accordance to that. So he has to be very careful. In such a situation, you have to know, צריך שידקדק על עצמו, he has to be very careful with himself, very particular with himself. ויעשה לפנים משורת הדין. A person has to do things in a way which is לפנים משורת הדין. לפנים משורת הדין means, practically speaking, that you have to be better than everybody else. You're held at another standard. You can't start doing because others are doing what they're doing, right? You cannot just behave in that way. You can't behave like everybody behaves. Oh, we saw this one and that one. Even if another rabbi behaves in a non-proper way, right? You can't do that. You can't do that. You are somebody that has a responsibility to do things in the proper way. Conversely, if the sage in particular is particular with himself, he's very careful with himself. And he speaks pleasantly with people. And he acts in an engaging manner towards others. And he receives them with a pleasant countenance. Sometimes he gets treated lightly by them and he's belittled, but he doesn't belittle them. He doesn't take to heart. And he respects everybody, even those who belittle him. And he is honest in his business. And he's not always going to parties and sitting down and wasting his time. He's always there studying Torah, being busy with Torah and mitzvot. For example, dressed like a Torah scholar with tzitzit and tefillin all the time. And he's always going beyond the letter of the law. And on the condition that he is not distancing himself from society or being hermit-like, right? You can't do that, I'm holy. No, guys, you flow. This person sanctified God's name. And on them the verse says, God says, Avdiata, you are my servant, Israel, that by you I am glorified. And this ends chapter 5. Bezat Hashem Yitbarach. Tomorrow we will continue with chapter 6, again at 11. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you. And thank you, please, those who want to sponsor a class, or those who want to share these classes, or our shorts, or whatever it is, or share the group, the WhatsApp group we have, please feel free to do so. And you'll be Mekadesh Hashem. Hopefully we'll bring more people, and we'll be able to bring this class to 1,000 people. Bezat Hashem, mark my words, we'll get there together. God bless.